50 miles east of here, and between Isle and Waukon on Highway 27, not on Highway 27, on a farm. So it's nice to be back home, and thankfully just before this meeting, I was able to work it out with my dad that the washer dryer did arrive, and it is being installed right now. So if I walk away to check on that, we got a new washer dryer at the farm. So I am with Growth and Justice. I'm president of Growth and Justice, and it's a Minnesota-based nonprofit, and we are here today.
Good afternoon. Good sultry summer afternoon, finally. Yeah. My name is Arlene Jones. As Jane said, I am a co-founder and executive director of Sprout, which is a food hub, which means we aggregate and distribute locally grown products from about 80 small family farms. And we distribute that food direct to consumer, but also to hospitals, restaurants, school districts, daycares, etc. We have 2 licensed kitchens in the back behind those doors where we do cooking demonstrations and nutrition education. And then we also have a mobile market that we just launched yesterday. So it's basically a mobile grocery store on wheels that goes out to areas where our area citizens don't have access to grocery store via transportation, or the grocery store is too far, there's no way for them to get there. And then lastly, the space that you're sitting in right here is our Sprout Growers and Makers Marketplace. 6 times a year we hold a Saturday market here, and our vendors include everybody from fiber artists to growers who preserve their products so it's available in the wintertime, to blacksmiths, to wood carvers, etc. It's a grand place to be in the winter when you're looking for something to do, and a great way to find your neighbor. I'm just going to do a few little housekeeping things right now. The bathrooms are actually right over there underneath that multilingual sign. There's men's is further down, and then the women's is on this side. And Maria Urbaski is here today. So anybody who would like to go participate in an art project or just needs a break from sitting on the art table and wants to go visit with Maria, please do so, and we'll explain a little bit later the relationship with Maria with Sprout. Okay?
Thanks so much. And we want to also thank the Reality Roasters for the coffee, although there's coffee right there. Water? Yep, Reality Roasters. Little Falls. And the Black and White, which is one of my favorite places here in Little Falls. So, for all the great food over there. So let me give you a little background. You know that I'm from this area. That's a little bit about what you know about me. And our organization, as I said, is a nonprofit. It's been around for about 17 years. It works to support business growth and community vitality. And also we understand that we need everybody to participate to keep our economy strong and our communities vital. We do nonpartisan, independent research and community engagement to learn about what's working around this state and the nation, and then we share what we learn across rural-urban connections in particular to inspire other good works across the state. And so again, I want to thank you for having us here in Little Falls, but we are really not the story of today. The story of today is all the people that are going to be talking after I do and give you a chance to ask questions and such, because there's just a lot happening in this region around economic development and other things as well. And as I said, I did a lot of growing up myself here, 50 miles east. It's a 120-acre farm that my great-grandparents settled when they came from Sweden. My other set of great-grandparents came from Nova Scotia, and they settled on the other side of town in a smaller farm. But my grandparents got together, and I'm here. So.
Yay!
Yay! And that time on the farm, as those of you who know who've been farm folks, and living between those 2 small towns really gave me a great grounding for the kind of work that I've done my entire career in community, economic, and rural development. And as a kid and as a young adult in those communities, I saw businesses succeed, I saw them fail, I saw them succeed again and fail and over again. I saw how the main streets would empty out and then fill up again, and some are empty again. And I saw how neighbors helped each other. especially in times of trouble and in times of celebration. I learned what a community can be in that struggle to grow and striving to be its best no matter what the circumstances. And for those lessons, I'm eternally grateful. We're here today to celebrate the local and regional initiatives in economic development and the start exactly 1 year ago today of the community-led process to build a statewide network of community-based people and organizations, the Thriving by Design Network, that are helping to create a community and economic development guidebook. I call it a guidebook because that's really what it is, the Minnesota Equity Blueprint. And I'll tell you a quick story about my great-grandfather, the Swede who came. In 1912, he and some of his buddies started the American Society of Equity in Isle, Minnesota, which was a way for the farmers to get together and make sure that the prices were fair for them together. And they also said that people in that society could have no more than 5 shares in that cooperative because they didn't want one person to be overwhelmingly in control. So I take my guidance from my great-grandparents who helped build those communities and who did so fairly.
You lick your finger?
Yeah. Sorry. Okay, one more. Gosh. I think it's the humidity. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So how we got to this point today was that in 2018, June 2018, we had a statewide gathering of just regular folk in Granite Falls, Minnesota. Some of you were there. At that meeting, we gathered some recommendations. We sort of learned about where our state is right now, particularly where it is economically. And over the next 6 months, we gathered nearly 700 recommendations from over 300 Minnesotans. And I was right here in this marketplace for one of those community meetings, 15 community meetings that we had. And then we had a last statewide gathering, but also online idea contributions, any way that ideas could be gathered. And they all emphasize the way in which issues are interconnected, because that's how community is. Community is multidimensional and complex. So today we're going to introduce you to the second chapter of this guidebook, Economic Development, through a short overview of the chapter contents. And then we're going to turn to local and regional community members to share their stories of economic development challenges and solutions. I want to thank Arlene and Natalie and the folks here at Sprout. As I said, I've been here before. I'm still learning the depth and breadth of what's happening in this place that I call a catalyst. And now I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Kate Searles, who's our Policy Research Director, to tell you a little bit about what's in the Economic Development chapter. And she just dropped down from Duluth, where she was talking to the Arrowhead Growth Alliance and about some of the challenges that they're seeing and what we can all do to help each other. Kate.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Jane. I invite you, if you don't already have one of these, to pick one up on your way out. It gives you a very, very abbreviated look at what the contents of this next chapter for us. Our first chapter, by the way, was on human capital and on unleashing potential among our individuals and families and communities. And so some of the topics that were in that, of course, are connected to the topics such as education, which is a human growth potential issue. It is also an economic development issue, but we talked about it in this other section. So we basically talk about workforce development and business development. And we have a crisis on both ends. We have a skilled labor shortage that is going to intensify, just given the basic demographics of our state. As people my age retire, there are not as many people coming up to take those positions. We also have a situation where wages are not growing in alignment with that contraction in the labor market. It's the head of the Minneapolis Fed who tells employers, they say, I can't find workers, and he says, well, have you increased wages? I know you're not serious about finding workers until you increase wages. We also have barriers associated with criminal records and the disenfranchisement and the barriers to housing and employment that are associated with people who have paid their debt for the worst time in their lives. And we have a labor force opportunity within our immigrants and refugees. One of the things that is both a business development and a workforce development issue and is really a crisis in greater Minnesota is childcare. And this is an issue that will touch on profitability. It will touch on the ability of households to escape poverty. It will touch on the empowerment of women. It'll touch on so many things. So on our economic development, on our business development front, we're really concerned about the decline in small businesses. We are finding that that's linked to the decline in small banks. At this point, Wells Fargo and what's our other big bank?
U.S. Bank?
U.S. Bank each have about a third of the state market. The next largest bank, which is Bremer, has 3%. That didn't always used to be the case. We are losing small banks across the state in a rapid rate. Small banks are where small business people go for credit, and that's where they prefer to go. So this is another reason, not only the Great Recession, but this is another reason why small business growth has declined. I will say that the #1 group forming new small businesses are people of color. Their rate of growth in businesses, in wages, and in revenue outstrips the average for the state. We also know that a business barrier is some of the regulations that are in place can really be costly, slow down entrepreneurs. They estimate the average small business will be paying over $12,000 to get started related to regulations. A big issue for our business development is the threat under which farming and agriculture, the sector that Minnesota came from, our roots, well, the roots of some regions of Minnesota are in agriculture. It is still the source of our #1 exports, and there have to be massive policy changes around ensuring that farmers are able to make enough money not only to cover their debt, but also to cover their families. And then we find that regions and communities are really interested in creating spaces like what we're in, Sprout. This is a big placemaking initiative across the state, and it really works for economic development. It works not only to bring in outside traffic, but it works to attract new residents. So with that, I think I am introducing Sprout. No,
Five Wings.
I'm introducing you.
I will be the hostess. Yeah, hostess with the mostest. Okay. So next we do want to start hearing from the regional and local champions here, and one of whom is Five Rings Art Council, and Mark Turner, the executive director, is here to tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. I'm Mark Turner, the executive director of the Five Wings Regional Arts Council. And you'll have to forgive me, I did not grow up on a farm in Morrison County. I grew up on a farm in Todd County. So don't hold that against me, just south of Clarissa. The Five Wings Arts Council is really kind of the go-to place for community development with a focus on the arts. So we specialize in working with artists, small rural communities, schools, to help artists find the resources they need to connect and to learn. So a little history about that. That organization started in the early to mid 70s when the Minnesota State Legislature had the foresight to realize just the impact and value of the arts in terms of community development and the impact on the quality of life for their residents. There's actually 11 regions. Well, there's one regional arts council that covers, so they're county-based. We cover the same counties that Region 5 does, Castro, Todd, Morrison, Waukegan County. So there's a regional arts council that covers every county in the state of Minnesota. And there's 11 in total. Funding is through the legislature. We're actually a state mandated direct line item in the budget, and we also get funding from the McKnight Foundation, which is a partner with us to support individual artists. The big game changer for us came in 2008. If folks remember the Legacy Amendment passed, it's a big shout out for the Legacy Amendment. Woo-hoo out there. But really, what it did is dedicate a portion of sales tax collected and dedicated that to be spent on the arts and arts community development initiatives. So what that did is about quadrupled our budget. And now we have an annual budget of about just a little over $500,000 a year to cover the 5 counties in arts and cultural heritage development. So what do we do with our funding? We give most of it away, and it's a great job. I've been doing this almost 30 years. And I give money away to small arts organizations, to communities that want to do arts projects, schools. We work a lot with schools to bring artists into the schools, and also in individual artists. Last year we gave away nearly $400,000 in direct investments back into the 5 counties, so we're very proud of that. Not a lot of overhead with what we do, and we're getting that money out to do the good work into the region where it belongs. In the last 10 years, we're actually celebrating the 10 years of the Legacy Amendment. That puts that number up to almost $4 million in direct grants out into the field for the 5 counties. And so that's, we're celebrating that as a 10-year mark, and we're actually seeing a lot of the benefits of that. You know, we have several, actually quite a few, well, several I should say, different grant programs and services that we offer. And I want to highlight just a couple that I kind of think fits in with what we're talking about here. But we are talking about economic development, so I do want to highlight a couple of things as well. Folks, again, if you're interested, pick up one of these on your way out as well. It's kind of a one-pager on economic development. Oh, maybe Don will hand a few out. There's just a couple numbers I want to highlight there since we're talking about our creative economy. There's lots of impressive numbers, but a couple I want to draw your attention to. Nonprofit arts and cultural organizations are contributing over $4.6 million to our local economy each year. That's a pretty impressive number, and as an administrator, I always like to look at return on investment. So I can look at our $400,000, give or take, a year that we're investing into arts and cultural development in the area. And that's leveraging 4.6 million, so I think that's doing its work. Even more impressive if you combine the full and part-time artists and creative workers economic impact to that, they're contributing over $8 million worth of impact annually. And let's just think about that for a second. Just artists and creative workers in our 5 counties are creating, impacting $8 million in impact for our counties. So that deserves mention and recognition, I think. There is actually a study very similar to this just for Morrison County. I didn't highlight that, but if you go to, all the information's on that one pager. If you want to go to the website, it has the whole breakdown of all the different studies that was done, the methodology, if you're interested in that, and how all those numbers put together. So that's just there for your resource for you. So if artists and creative workers are putting $8 million of impact annually into the region, why do we? It seems seemingly that they're always one of the last people that are asked to come to the table when things are happening. So that's one of the things that we do. We do award a lot of grants, but more importantly, one of our primary goals is to bring artists essentially to the table and to the forefront of the conversations that we're having. We know through our work that arts organizations as a whole have a certain social cohesiveness, and they genuinely desire to better their communities through engagement of everyone involved. every community member. So some examples, we do offer what's called Arts-Based Community Development Grant, and that supports art-based projects. The Arts-Based Community Development Grants. So it supports arts-based projects that address a shared community issue, problem, or need. The program is specifically designed to foster partnerships between arts and non-arts entities and strengthen the role of the arts and community development, requiring partners to identify and work directly with artists. So examples of this, some successful grants that we've had just recently, there's an organization called Wellness in the Woods, which is a mental health, peer-run mental health service organization. And I don't know if you folks have been affected by this. With a group this size, I think there probably is. I know I've been affected personally of the suicide rate in rural Minnesota is at an all-time high, especially in rural and farm country. I've had people in my family and close to me that have taken their life as well. So it really strikes home, and I think if people would look around and look at each other, you probably know someone that suffers or struggles with some mental health issues. Anyway, the project was to Wellness in the Woods, a peer-run mental health group, commissioned and worked with a couple of theater artists that specialize in community engagement. Went out and talked to folks, and this is kind of the Ferndale, Wadena area, kind of close down to Eagle Bend, Barville area. I think that's the kind of corridor they went down. Gathered stories, people to participate. Actually wrote a screenplay, or actually a play, that all the same participants that were in the planning of it actually put on the production, and it was kind of a traveling show to 4 different venues in those same communities, and the impact is kind of bone-chilling. I've heard just direct stories, and we have files full of anecdotes from people saying that the value that had on not only themselves as a participant, but people in the audience, and there was a lot of survivors of either mental health crisis or spouses that have lost their loved ones due to depression and taking their own lives. So that was just one example of a non-traditional, non-arts organization, a social service organization working with artists and the community to engage everyone to address and at least get a conversation going. I know we're limited on time, but I'll just take maybe just a couple more examples. Well, a real quick one right here, that same program is a community mural featuring found objects. Actually, Heidi is involved with that project that explores the story around local foods, farmers, distributors, and the communities they serve. So that's a work in progress right now. So we're working on that. And another one is kind of the other side of the story, which is a real positive engagement of the community. It's called Picture Us Beautiful, and this is in Wadena. If you folks have driven through Wadena anytime recently, you know that Highway 10 is all tore up there, and there's some other infrastructure that's going on there. So what's happening is there's a group of citizens that is working with a group of artists as well to really get ahead of the ball, to design some green space, some public space that is more aesthetic than just what MnDOT would do, is essentially the nutshell of it. So they've been working hard on collaborating, a lot of meetings, and actually having a cultural plan for the enhancement of those roads. The En La Carte project, I know it was mentioned a little bit earlier before. I think it's kind of self-explanatory. That's a really artist engagement into the communities, bringing the art right to the communities that they serve, and coupled with mobile markets, which is really an idea. So I could ramble on with a whole bunch of examples, but I think my time is up, so I'll turn it back over to Jake.
Thanks so much, Mark. Please do take a moment and work there with Marie. I did a little art piece myself, which will be on display and available for sale. And without further ado, I want to introduce a good friend of mine, Don Hickman, with the Initiative Foundation, who's going to talk about childcare and economic development.
Thank you, Jane. I'm 3 generations off the farm. We were Iowegians, so I clearly have the least credibility of anyone who's spoken so far today. But I have known Jane for over 20 years. We worked together at the Landon Foundation a long time ago. And one of the joys of working in rural community development is you keep crossing paths with the same leaders. So thanks for having me today. If I have less enthusiasm than the previous speakers, I apologize. I got the flu. But when I promised Jane I'd talk about child care, I was not going to let that deter me. Perhaps child care doesn't sound like economic development, but as you alluded to, it sure is right now. The Initiative Foundation's been investing in early childhood literacy, school readiness, social emotional adjustment. Tammy, there you are, was my program leader for many years before she jumped ship to Sourcewell. I'm glad you're there. But about 2 years ago, we really started to open our eyes on the impact of lack of access to quality, affordable child care in terms of workforce engagement. In central Minnesota, and I define that as our 14 counties, it's estimated that there are 17,000 people that are seeking child care and can't find an affordable slot. And when all of our counties right now have between 2 and 4% unemployment, we can't afford to have that many people staying home. If that's their choice, bless them, that's fine. Totally supportive, but a lot of them wish they could work and just can't find the opportunity. Is John Rademacher here? John is kind of my poster child for telling this story. He's the city administrator for Little Falls. And when he was hired here, he said, great, I'll be there, and my family will follow as soon as we find child care. 3 months later, they were still on waiting lists, and he was questioning whether he'd made the right choice. And John is exactly the kind of young, professional, polished leader all of us want to be attracted to our community. We can't afford to let that be the barrier. And because of that experience, that challenge to his family, they're all here and happy now, and she's as important to the community as he is. John has been particularly sensitive to the need to make improvements. In fact, he held a meeting at our place last spring and had all the providers who were available come and talk about what their future plans were. And at the time, within the city of Little Falls, he knew that they had a shortfall of about 400 slots of folks who were seeking child care and couldn't find it. And 2 women in that crowd looked like me and said, well, we're retiring soon. And so he already knew that this was going up, the shortfall was going up. The thing that shocked us both is there were 2 sweet young ladies who said, we're leaving too. We went into this field because our children were at home, and we saw it as a way to make money and be with our children. But when Junior starts kindergarten this fall, we're done. We don't make enough money. It's too big a hassle, and you can make more money in a lot of different fields these days. So John walked into that meeting hoping he had a solution to 400 slot deficit. He walked out of it realizing he had a 600 slot deficit, and it's not getting any better in the near term. The good news is we have been very fortunate this year to get 2 different grants, one from the Department of Human Services and one from the Department of Employment and Economic Development. And indeed, Little Falls, all of Morrison County, and Long Prairie, Staples, Motley, Clarissa, and all of Todd County are 2 of the communities that have applied and were selected to take advantage of that. Both have already received grants of $10,000 and will be convening public to talk about what solutions could work. It's a broken economic system. And so just subsidizing care in the short term is a Band-Aid that won't solve anything. We need to look at alternative business models. We need to attract new people to the field. We can use that money to subsidize training for new people to enter the field. With some restrictions, I'm grinning at Cheryl, hopefully we'll offer some forgivable loans for folks who can add slots and expand their business. It's a great opportunity for someone who's not previously been an entrepreneur, and we'll subsidize training. So our friends at Sourcewell offer all kinds of great training for folks entering the field, and we'll be partnering with them. And the beauty of the second grant, the DEED grant that we just got, is you get the initial 10, now we'll have additional money to follow up with that. The 10 is meant to be a challenge grant to engage private sector and public sector. They are supposed to help match the 10. The other money doesn't necessarily need to be a match. But again, the point is providers are not getting rich. They're barely holding it together. Yet parents are really struggling to figure out how to pay for childcare. It is not cheap. We're open-minded to intelligent conversations about whether the field is overregulated or if there are smarter ways to do things. But really, this at the end of the day is a business model and labor force development initiative. And I'm quite certain, in fact, my boss has looked me in the eye and repeated multiple times, we're in this even after the state grants run out. This is a problem. We have to make a dent in. Compared to the other regions of greater Minnesota, I think the next largest deficit is barely half of what ours is. And if businesses can't find the workers they need, they will leave. It kind of goes back to your banker story. Is as we get less and less locally owned, as the businesses aren't rooted in our communities, they'll go where the labor force is. And I don't mean to be dark and grim. Let's respond to that. But it's appalling to think that a region known for its workforce ethic, a state that's always had the highest percentage of women in the workforce, is not got that reputation at the moment. We're no longer #1 on women in the workforce, and I'm convinced the child care shortage is one of the primary reasons. Question, Bob?
In your survey, have you checked how many organizations have on-site childcare and what size businesses can support that?
Sure. So, and great question, and maybe you and I should talk later because I only get 10 minutes. But one of the things that we have learned in this is one size doesn't fit all. In southern Minnesota, where we have many larger, I don't work in southern Minnesota, but peers of mine have larger employers, they often will host child care on site. In St. Cloud, where I do work, we've had several private sector leaders come in and say, we'll give you the first floor, we'll pay the utilities if you'll open a child care center there. What strategy would be greater at worker retention and loyalty? When my wife and I, a long time ago, had small children, we had child care right around the corner from her office at Central Lakes College. And my gosh, that really engendered loyalty and appreciation for that employer. So that's certainly an option on the table. The flip of that is home-based care is easier to expand, to welcome new people into the workforce, and it's cheaper than center-based care. And some parents are going to choose that home-based care over center-based care just out of personal preference or religious alignment or a gazillion other factors. So we want, part of the reason we're not giving a prescriptive plan to each community, that the community needs to develop that plan, is it will reflect what their needs and economies and of interested folks to enter the field say they need. One thing we don't want is to have a fine institution like a school district or a hospital come in to the market and say, we'll solve it, we'll open child care, and drive everyone out of business that's already been providing it, which is, again, part of the reason you've got to have an inclusive community conversation. As an institution can have a big footprint and some severe unintended consequences if folks aren't all at the table working through what's best for our town. But I'm happy to talk to you about institutions that can host child care, because we're definitely open to it.
Thank you.
Yes?
I'm just wondering if you can touch up on, the child care fraud, because there's millions and millions of dollars of child care fraud, and if we had that money that was accounted for by, the organizations, that would be able to allow millions of dollars to go back into our daycare system. So what can we do with this fraud? Because, there's a lot of people who have home daycares and they say, the fraud is also deterring me too. Why should
Sure.
I work so hard and get nothing and wreck my home when there's so much fraud and there's not anything being done about it?
Sure.
To the public's knowledge.
I'll readily say that's not my area of expertise. I'm going to compare it to an experience I had very young in my career. Right out of graduate school, I worked with rural, low-income communities that were non-compliant with federal clean water standards. And what I very quickly learned was nobody breaks the law. No community breaks the law intentionally. They didn't have the capacity to know when and how to take their samples correctly. And so my job was to help those communities figure out how to get in compliance with the law. I do believe there's fraud. The state auditor has cited problems with DHS, Department of Human Services accounting system, and as one of their grantees, I can say there are other agencies occasionally easier to work with. They're on watch, they're on alert that they've got to do better. But my suspicion, as I get into this deeper, is what we're going to find is that if the fraud was unintentional, technical assistance and coaching will close the gap. And if it's intentional, I'll bet it's mostly women, desperate enough to make ends meet because they weren't cash flowing, that they resorted to very poor decisions. And again, I'm not advocating breaking the law, but my hope is through technical assistance, we can help folks figure out how to make a buck, stay in business, provide quality service, and never cross that line. That's about all I can say because I'm not on the regulatory side of things. I hate fraud. I work in rural low-income communities, and every dollar I can save anywhere can benefit somebody who really needs it. And so if we figure out ways, if you come to our meetings and have ideas on how to close that gap, I'm all ears. But I don't think it's really what's driving the system. What's really driving the system is these are low-wage jobs, and you work long hours, and parents don't have a whole lot of money to put into it. We've got to figure out a smarter model. I'm sure I met my 10 minutes. Do you go?
I think you are.
Okay. Thank you.
I just want to say in the blueprint we do have some references to a lot of the organizations that Don mentioned, and one I'd like to highlight. One is the First Children's Finance, which works with communities, as Don said, at the community level. And as he also said, that there's no one size fits all. And what the wonderful thing about First Children's Finance is that they will help a community or a provider or a would-be provider start to make the business plan, the business case for either the home-based business or a center-based childcare business. And the other group is Think Small, which has been working in this arena for just probably about as long as First Children's Finance. And the interesting thing from our standpoint as community and economic development people is that finally our profession is starting to look at childcare as really that key piece of both understanding and action, because without it, you're just not going to keep people or attract people as a workforce, especially if you like young families. I would like to now introduce, I think, Cheryl or Don, who's going to do the Region 5.
We can hang out together.
Hang out together, okay. And tell us a little bit about all the great stuff that's happening with Region 5. I am a huge fan of the Regional Development Commission system. Happy 50th anniversary this year, guys. Yeah, 1969 was when these organizations started, and it's...
we are actually 46 years old
well,
today.
you're 40,
Because it's my birthday today,
it's
and I was
Don's
born the
birthday.
day we started.
Wow.
Yeah, happy birthday, Don! Yeah, so the whole
Let's sing.
system across the country started 50 years ago, but they recognize your birthday here. So,
Right.
okay, so go for it.
Like Jane said, my name is Dawn Espy. I'm with Region 5 Development Commission as a planner. I've been with the organization for almost 5 years now.
And I'm Cheryl Hills, the director of Region 5's, been there since 2006. Thought we'd share a little bit about who is Region 5, so before we start talking about the Welcoming Communities program, so that you have a bit of breadth about the type of work that we do. We are governed by 22 elected officials per state statute. We are a unit of government in state statute, like cities and counties. We do not set our levy. The state does that for us. We also have special interest groups that sit on our commission, like Camp Ripley, Leech Lake Band of Ojibwa, others that, school districts and others that represent our bosses, our 22 elected official bosses. Region 5 also has a 501c3 underneath the umbrella of our organization, same staff. That is a private sector ran nonprofit, all either bankers, CPAs, attorneys, others, and they manage our lending portfolio that we do as part of our lending. before we start talking about lending communities, I thought we'd share a little bit about what it is that we do. So we do have a lending arm of the organization that does loans to businesses, and we do septic system loans and well water loans and micro business loans. So those are our business loans. So we do about $4 to $5 million-ish a year. We've probably got about 11 million in our portfolio right now. So that's some of the work that we do. We also have a 30-year agreement and relationship with MnDOT. So we're heavily vested in transportation. And we do a lot with the county engineers and with other folks in the region that represent all 5 modes of transportation. So every year we do something by way of either trail, rail, and other work. So that assistance allows us to take the federal dollars from transportation that come down to the state DOTs and then come down to the regions, and we're contracted by MnDOT to work with the engineers to figure out which road systems will be improved. That's our transportation work. And then we get this other bucket that gets everything else that has regional relevancy. So regional development commissions were created by the state of Minnesota to address regional critical issues that do not necessarily duplicate the work of the private, public, or nonprofit partners. We have a lot of partners in this room that we do work with in community development. Right now, our bosses, that's why I told you who they were, have set forth a work plan that allows us to go out and get a lot of community and civic ideas about what is important for us to work on. So we do outreach through all of our planning processes, also through a lot of extensive outreach every year when we do, and every 5 years when we update our comprehensive economic development strategy. We're a child of EDA, Department of Commerce. In one element, we are what's considered an economic development district. Like, you needed one more title for us. But that means that under the federal umbrella, we create a plan every year that talks about what does this region need to focus on in terms of economic development. What Dawn talked about in childcare was obviously spoke about through all of our business sector, private, public, and nonprofit. Affordable housing, some other issues that we have in the region, access to broadband. Those are some issues that come up in those dialogues. So we do a lot of civic engagement through all of our projects and programming. What's driven that is our work plan that says we, right now, under community development, focus on access to affordable broadband in rural places. We focus on local foods. We focus on renewable energy. Those are 3 of the primary areas that we focus on. Throughout our work, we've partnered with lots of folks in this room. Through the local foods work, Sprout has been a partner. Through our placemaking work, 5 Wings has been a partner. Through our renewable energy work, you'll hear from Jason Edens, and Real has been a partner. Happy Dancing Turtle is a partner in terms of teaching us how to do sustainability from day one. So we've learned a lot from folks like that through the process of the Resilient Region effort. So we've done a lot of outreach. What we wanted to share with you a little bit about today was the Welcoming Communities work that has spun from that outreach. Private sector said, we can't find workers. We don't have a work base. We will not expand. We will not stay if we do not have a qualified workforce. So therefore, we start thinking about, well, what is our role in that? What should we be doing? And we asked the region, and they said, figure out how when millennials come to this community, or veterans come to this community, or disabled people come to this community and they get a job, how we keep them in our communities. How do we make them feel welcoming so that they want to keep their job and be part of our community and part of our civic processes? So that's, I'll let Dawn talk a little bit about the Welcoming Communities program and why we're doing that.
So as Cheryl mentioned, we recognize that workforce development was a crucial need for our region, and how are we going to do that? And we saw, obviously, help wanted signs all over the place and knew we need to start attracting and retaining a qualified workforce. And so as we started working with our partners, we discovered that they were already really working quite actively with the employers, because the employers were the first, I think, to kind of feel this workforce shortage. And so we thought, well, who else can we be working with to help make our communities more welcoming? And so we thought local units of government, nonprofit boards, and also more of the public sector could maybe use some ideas as well to how they can retain and attract a workforce, because that is being a part of the community is such a big part of why people stay in a region. And so how can we find those ways that we can connect those that come to our region with other people in the region and kind of form more of a community connection. So we started looking at different models, and we came across the intercultural development inventory model. And while we recognize that this is just one of many tools, what this model did was it gave us a nice introduction into a common language for the rest of the region to talk about. And this cultural assessment really talks about how we bridge differences amongst each other. And so this can be, differences between vets, between millennials, between people in poverty, between rural and urban. Just how are we bridging those differences so that we can better work together? So we've gone out to the community now and worked with 10 different organizations and local units of government to go through this IDI process. And now we're working on phase 2, where we're going to be working more closely with 6 different communities in the region and really looking at what are we doing, taking a deep look at our region and taking a deep look at our communities and thinking, what can we do to be more welcoming? Not to say that we're not welcoming now, but there are always improvements in people that we might not be paying attention to that could use some community development love. So that's the work that we're progressing on right now.
So that work has been funded, since I mentioned that we do retain some levy dollars from the state, completely by foundations who are funded via donors to do work that the foundations want to do. And so we've partnered with foundations who are like thinkers in this space of trying to help create welcoming communities. And that's how all of that work is funded in the region. We also take some of those dollars and pass them through us to the communities so they can do a project in their community that exemplifies how they want to be welcoming. So I think it's really important to note that the welcoming communities work that we do isn't being shoved down anyone's throat. It's a cohort of the willing. Communities come to us and say, we want to do this, and then we facilitate that dialogue, and they decide how they spend their money. We do not decide that. So I think that's important to share, that these are community-driven decisions based on communities who have asked for this kind of engagement from Region 5.
And I can just give an example quick. One of the communities that I started working with recently, their idea of who they'd like to attract is that they're recognizing that with the baby boomers starting to retire, a lot of the people that have cabins up here are retiring from the metro and moving to their cabins permanently. And there's obviously some differences between people that have lived in rural for a long time and people that have lived in urban for a long time and now are coming together. So what can we do about helping that? Greg?
I'd like to say, I've worked at several health-type centers around this area, and I'd have to say, this county is incredibly welcoming toward the groups that you mentioned. Handicapped, veterans, the elderly. There are no issues in those areas, and you know it. The honest truth is, when you talk about intercultural, you are talking about refugees and immigrants. Is that not correct? I've read your stuff on the internet.
That is not the only group that we are talking about. No, we are talking about being welcoming to all. We recognize that our region is very white. I mean, that's just a fact, and we recognize that. And that's not what this program is about. This program is being welcoming to everybody that lives within our region, okay? And so that does mean vets, because there maybe are pockets of and not saying Morrison County, you guys are doing a great job of recognizing vets, but there are pockets within our region that maybe could be doing a better job. Or maybe they're recognizing themselves that, ooh, this is a population that we might like to explore.
So the Morrison County communities get to self-define whether they want to be part of this program or not, Greg. They get to decide that. And so they will decide which audiences and which groups they feel like they need to focus on to be more welcoming. This is not, you have to be welcoming to immigrants. This is not, you have to be welcoming to any population. It's that you get the opportunity to think about how you can be economically competitive to attract a workforce that allows your businesses to stay in operation. And so, I mean, it's certainly not saying that anyone is doing a terrible job. They're coming to us, and by the way, there's a waiting list. And some of those communities are in Morrison County, and that's okay. And we'll work with them in the way that they want to. But we're not saying that this is a program specifically for immigrants, for people of color, for any population. We're saying that we are trying to make sure that we give tools to those who want them, that learn how to bridge all cultures. And that could be a culture of poverty, it could be a culture of age, it could be a cultures of even industries. Teachers have a culture, policemen have a culture. There are cultures within industries, and we're figuring out how to make sure we bridge all of those cultures so that we can all work together. Does that help answer your question?
I would submit that they don't really need your help. I believe the private sector is perfectly capable, and the churches, of keeping up with that stuff. I read your website. I've also seen the plans that you write, and most of the plans that you write are based around about 2 to 3% of the population. They don't reflect the vast majority of residents in Morrison County. Read their websites, folks.
And most of these folks have read our websites and been there. And I respect your opinion that these communities don't need your help, our help. They differ from you, or they wouldn't be calling us. I'm not calling them. They're calling us. So when people ask us to come in to provide this kind of assistance, it's the private sector that are calling us. They are businesses, and I can name the CEOs that have said, we would like this kind of conversation. So while parts of Morrison County may not, and you may not, I am going to disagree because we do have a waiting list. So there are folks that want it. But I think as our 10-minute, I don't want to, we'll take maybe a couple more questions because I know you guys have a great program here. One more question back there, I'm sorry now.
I was just going to ask if you guys have links on your website. I guess I'm not 100% familiar with exploring all of your website at this point, but I'm just wondering if you have links to your contributors, your private sectors, your CEOs, so that the people who are trying to get behind you or want to get behind you on some of these projects know who they're all getting behind, because it sounds like it's kind of a package deal for you guys, whether it is one section or another. And so it'd be nice to know what all comes or who all comes in this package deal, because there may be people that represent something that I don't, but there might also be people that represent things that I truly believe in. And so it'd be nice to know who is kind of behind the ideology and the run and the, the order of operations behind your guys' organization.
Do you mean our officers, ma'am, or do you mean like our partners that fund us? I'm not sure I truly understand.
Your partners that fund you, the 20 CEOs, basically the core people who are involved, the political leaders that you talk about. It'd be nice to have that information so that people could support you, knowing who they're kind of behind.
That's a good, Dawn mentioned we just had a completely rebuild of our website with a new brand coming upon the 50th anniversary. And so we do, under the Welcoming Communities page, have which city councils have asked us to come in and do this with the city councils, which nonprofits, which foundations, which other groups have participated thus far. I'm pretty sure we have that on there. If not, we certainly will. And then we did list who's funded us for these programs on a majority of those pages. But I'll take another quick look at it and make sure. And if you have any questions, please feel free to call us and say, I'm not sure who's funding this. It's not real clear yet, or who's participating. But we've been trying to lift those folks up. We're actually having a media event in October. We're having a bunch of media and legislators and others, and a celebration of all of the folks that are taking it and are part of that program. And by the way, we have a lot of programs, but we're having a celebration open to the public and open to the media to celebrate those communities, and we'll do our best to make sure that that's out in all of the media as well, so you know about it. Thank you.
I think the mic's still on, yes? Okay, great. We have 2 more speakers to go. How's everybody doing? And I'm a little bit cooler right now, so that's good. I'm usually the harbinger of humidity. So what I'd like to introduce Jason Edens, if Jason is here. Where's Jason? Okay. There he is, okay. To talk about renewable energy, which is a huge job creator, and among many other things. Jason.
Indeed. Thank you, Jane. Well, good afternoon, friends. My name is Jason Edens, and I have the privilege of running a small business based here in our region. It's called the Renewable Energy Alliance, or REAL. We are a general contractor and an electrical contractor, and we design and build local energy systems for the community. We had recently the privilege of working with Region 5 in order to reduce the cost of running our local schools. So in partnership with Region 5, we have recently deployed a multitude of solar energy systems that's generating energy locally and again, reducing the operating costs of our schools. If you're running a school, would you prefer to invest your limited, scarce resources on electricity, on heat, or would you prefer to invest in more teachers, more textbooks, more facilities at the school? This project that we've done in partnership with a handful of regional resources is intended to do just that. It's intended to reduce and stabilize the operating costs of our local schools so they can invest in our future leaders. They can invest in our students. So just recently, Region 5 and REAL had the pleasure of commissioning these systems all across our region. These systems are now reducing the operating costs for our schools. As Jane mentioned, clean energy and solar energy is very much of an economic engine. We are very proud in our region, having started in 2000, to be creating quality jobs, high-paying jobs for our community. Right now, the clean energy industry in Minnesota is generating jobs 10 times faster than the background labor market. We are creating jobs substantially faster, and most of these jobs are not surprisingly in the metro. Of the 60,000 clean energy jobs in Minnesota, the vast majority of those are in the metro. So we're very proud to bring those jobs here to our region and catalyze more growth and more jobs. That's not the only thing our organization does. In addition to working with our schools, we also generate an inclusive workforce. So although many employers right now are trying to find and fill jobs, because of the tight labor market, they're going to non-traditional labor sources. We're committed to building an inclusive solar workforce, so we do that as part of our mission. We've had the good fortune of working very closely with the First Nations in our region, and we've created a handful of solar jobs for band members of the First Nations in our region. We're very proud of that work. You know, many of our neighbors are struggling with a high energy burden. In other words, many of our neighbors have to choose between home energy and other basic needs like healthcare or housing. When families have to make that choice, they're living in what we call energy poverty. Energy poverty affects at least 1 in 8 of us here today. So this is a serious issue. It's a serious challenge for central Minnesota, for Todd County, for Morrison County. Our organization is committed to reducing the energy burden for low-income Minnesotans, ensuring the benefits of clean, reliable, stable energy are also available to our low-income neighbors. In the spirit of that, we deliver solar energy systems directly to low-income families. Now, those families that are your neighbors, that are our friends and family, that are having to choose between home energy and other needs, those community members can turn to the Energy Assistance Program or Heating Assistance. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that program if you haven't benefited from it yourself. What we're suggesting is rather than just paying low-income families' energy bills, we can permanently empower our low-income neighbors with clean energy. This summer, my colleagues and I are going to be building a system right here in Little Falls in partnership with Tri-County Community Action Council, specifically for low-income disabled veterans. For those community members who have made a very significant sacrifice to our country, yet are still suffering from energy burdens, high energy burdens. This summer, our organization, again in partnership with Region 5, the Initiative Foundation, and other community leaders, we're going to be deploying a system where rather than just paying low-income families' energy bills, we're going to be permanently addressing high energy burdens for low-income disabled veterans. It's more fiscally conservative and it's environmentally appropriate. So we're very proud of this work that we're doing here. We're very proud of empowering our low-income neighbors, and we want everyone to understand that clean energy is an economic engine. It's developing a lot of jobs. It's creating a lot of growth in our neighborhoods. So thank you very much, all of you, for joining us today. We're very glad to be a part of it.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am, of course.
Okay, so what do we do in the winter time when it's 40 below wind chills and the wind turbines freeze up because the oil no longer circulates and all the solar, whatever you call them, panels are covered with snow?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, fortunately, solar energy works in such a way that it's in parallel. It's what's called parallel generation with the utility. So in other words, at night, for example, or when the panels are covered with snow, we obviously live in a very cold climate, so when that happens, which is on a daily basis with night, the grid continues to supply the school, the local unit of government, our homes, our businesses. So I'm certainly not suggesting that solar is some sort of silver bullet, but it is part of the golden buckshot. It's part of our energy future. So again, we're not suggesting that solar is going to meet all the energy needs. We are suggesting, however, that it's an important part of our energy future. Let me just say one more thing in response to that. Here in Minnesota, sir, we do not have any coal. We do not have any oil. We do not have any natural gas. Each and every year, the state of Minnesota spends $18 billion out of the state, out of our region. The vast majority of our energy in the state of Minnesota must be purchased from elsewhere. By generating energy locally, it's local control, it's local democracy, it's local energy. It's a much more fiscally conservative approach. Now, I don't install wind, so I know very little about wind. However, solar energy functions very well in Minnesota, and here's a fun fact. Minneapolis and Houston have the exact same solar resource.
Completely different weather. But also this winter, in the cities, they had to turn their thermostats down to 55. Well, when you've got 20 below and 30 below weather out there, turning it down to 55 is not good, which now means you have wind turbine, you have solar panels, and you have to have another source. So therefore, now you have to have 3 sources, which tells me those rates, I mean, you're spending a heck of a lot more money just to heat your house.
Well, I think that's a very good point, ma'am. Actually, the folks that are having to turn their thermostats down are the folks that we serve. And when we empower such families with solar energy, they don't have to do that as often. And that's the point. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Jane?
Thank you. I will tell you another fun fact about energy creation. I'm a historian, by an amateur one, albeit, and I pulled a 1908 Institute of Farming document out of the trash at the Applied Econ department one day at the University of Minnesota Farm Campus, and lo and behold, there were a series of stories in this document, and I can show it to you guys if you want to see it. It's really fascinating. One of the stories was how before 1908, we were producing our own energy on the farm through gasohol, through creating gasohol with the scrap feed and seed and grass and such. And we know how to do this. Yes, we do have to rely on a whole bunch of different sources right now, but I see us in sort of a transition zone of trying to, and it's like broadband or anything. No one technology is going to get us there, but we need to keep working together on it. And what the 1908 Farm Manual told me, and there's also a story in there about how to start your own telephone cooperative, so if anybody needs broadband, come see me. It just tells us that we have the ingenuity. All the people that you've heard from today, the people that are here today, we have the ingenuity to move forward together, and that's part of what this meeting's about. To close our presentations, I want to call again upon Arlene and maybe Natalie, if both want to come up here, and talk a little bit more about what happens in this building. Because I remember when it was the Crestliner factory, and here it is in use again.
All right, thank you. I'm going to give you the 101 history of Sprout. Sprout was founded on the principle that agriculture is an economic engine in central Minnesota. We have a great capacity to grow food here in central Minnesota, and we also have a responsibility to feed the people here in central Minnesota. So Sprout is a federally recognized 501c3 with a mission to provide services to the community that help address the gaps in food insecurity, access to food, affordability, availability, with a specific goal and focus of supporting our small family farmers and providing equitable markets for every grower to participate in the economic development component of local foods. That's how Sprout was founded. As a 501c3, we are dedicated to that mission and have developed this facility to help provide the transportation, infrastructure, and logistics necessary to move over 100,000 pounds of food from about 80 small family farmers. And a lot of our small family farmers are Latino, Amish, tribal, and farms operated primarily by women. Sprout, as I said, is a food hub, and a food hub is basically, in a general informational way, a place where you aggregate food from multiple farms and then you distribute it out to those market channels. In the last 5 years since we've been in operation, I want you to know that 60% of our operational budget goes back out for cost of goods sold. What that means is 60% of the money that our operating revenue goes back out to our small family farms. 60%. It's pretty remarkable. In the last 5 years, that's probably almost $750,000 to those growers in the last 5 years. Now, what does that mean for you? It means that your neighbors, your community, your friends, your family have a new market opportunity to participate in, and that revenue is staying here in our local economy because we're the folks that are going back out and shopping at the local hardware store, shopping at the local grocery store, the small chains, and keeping that money flowing in our economy. The latest figures are for every $1 spent locally, 87 cents stays locally. That's pretty impressive. The other components of Sprout are the 2 shared use licensed kitchens. When we were developing this facility, we engaged artists from the very beginning, and in this space that had absolutely nothing in it, had about 30 local residents and artists help us design this space before we put 1 penny into its development. Because we believe that when artists are at the table, we are going to get a greater product in the end because of their visions, their insights, their creativity, and their skill sets that I certainly don't have. I know how to grow food and move food, but I'm not an artist. What we identified was that we didn't have value-added kitchens in our area. We didn't have kitchens that we could rent out to growers that want to continue to improve their bottom line by doing value-added production. So taking your overages, bringing it into the kitchen, and processing it into something else that you can then sell to your local grocery stores or other places. We also use our kitchens to do cooking demonstrations, so we've had cooking classes and lots of community members show up for those, to cooking sushi, Easter brunch, cooking with your kids in the kitchen, how to prepare salsa, how to safely prepare sauerkraut, because people really want to know how to use local foods and get back to the basics. People really do want to spend their money locally. People really do want to be responsible for their own health and well-being, and one of the ways that we can do that is through the intake of our nutritions and eating more locally grown foods. The other component is this marketplace. This marketplace was developed under an Art Place America award, and that award has helped us continue to develop this facility in a placemaking way. Place is another phrase, placemaking, that you heard Jane talk about. Placemaking is basically creating place for people to go and spend their money. That's basically what it means. Placemaking is a very creative way to develop physical spaces in an economic development way in order to create local economies where that local wealth sticks and that individual livelihoods are enhanced by the development of those properties. I happen to own a farm myself in just south of Brainerd, and we've created a farm that is a destination for families to go to in the fall. So I have a lot of experience in placemaking. The other component that's very, very important to us and a passion to Sprout, core to its mission and its staff, is our marketplace focus. So now we do a lot of stuff in the summertime as well. We have a summer harvest dinner coming up in July, where it's a 5-course meal prepared by local chefs. Every course is paired with wine. It's a wonderful opportunity to come and taste local foods right here in this facility. It's pretty reasonable, so people can participate. We do other events. Yeah, we name off a few calendar ones that we do. Minced is probably our signature event. Minced is an event where how many of you have watched the food show Chopped? Okay, so Chopped basically is a competition of chefs using mystery ingredients, and every round a chef gets chopped, or minced in our case, until there's a winner at the very end. We bring the kitchen right out here into where you guys are sitting. We had about 350 people come and watch that competition this year. I've heard nothing but absolutely positive feedback about it. So we try to do some really creative things in this space as well. The core component of this was to create a marketplace that was open in the wintertime when summer farmers markets are not available, and when people are looking for that destination, so placemaking, they're looking for that destination, a place to go, spend time with their friends and family, and get out of the house, even if it's wintertime. Now we know that farmers markets are more than just where you go to buy your food. They are a place where people have social connectedness in their communities. You go to any farmer's market, you'll find somebody that's their neighbor that they haven't seen for a while, visiting and getting caught up on things. So we know that creating the marketplace was a place for people to come out and have another opportunity for that social connectedness in the wintertime. But also we knew from traveling across the world that the most diverse markets are the ones that have more opportunity for engagement with citizens. So live music, cooking demonstrations, ready-to-eat food so you can eat while you come here, and then the availability to visit with your local growers and makers, so growers and artists in this facility. Pick up the things you want, buy your mom's birthday present, don't forget it's your wife's anniversary present before you walk out the door. And also with an intentional focus on representing the cultures that we live in. And that includes Latino, tribal, Amish, East African, Somali, youth, and growers. And I am here to tell you that I am incredibly proud of the work that we have done here, the relationships that we have built, the economic development opportunities for our growers and our makers, the social connectedness opportunities for our community, and for embracing the people that we live with. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Arlene. So that concludes our presentations from folks around the region. I know some of you have to take off. Good to see you all. And what I just want to let you know about some of the next steps here is that obviously all of the work that's going on here in the region and in the localities will continue. We at Growth and Justice want to be an ally to that in the sense that we want to help promote all of the good works that are happening here and share the stories across the state and across the nation even. Our next chapter in terms of working with the network of people, and you're all included, please, if you haven't signed up already, we'd love for you to be a part of that network, is to Kate is already at work on the infrastructure chapter. That's going to be probably not not as in-depth maybe as the economic development, but, well, she's telling me that probably will be. Okay. I mean, we got a lot of ideas. We worked with the engineering groups in the state, and we want to tell the story again of where we are at with Minnesota infrastructure, where we're headed, and what we can help each other do about the opportunities and the great challenges that we have with water, with clean water, with sewer, sewer and wastewater. All those things that we kind of take for granted, and you know, when you flip the switch, the lights go on, and the phone works, and oh yeah, my internet works. Well, there's a lot of people behind that, and so we're gonna try to get in as much depth as we can. And sometime I think in maybe early September. I'm looking at Kate. No, sometime in the early fall, we will travel with us up to northwestern Minnesota. I want to take these guys up to where I had my first job ever out of college, which is the Norman County Index in Ada, Minnesota. We might not go to Ada, but we might go farther northwest so that people can experience the Lake Agassiz. How many people know about Lake Agassiz up there? Glacial Lake Agassiz, right? Where you can see the shoreline on Highway 9 heading up to Crookston. So, we're going to try to do the infrastructure discussion, conversation up in that area, and we've got a hand up from Carter.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, how do you define infrastructure?
The question was, how do you define infrastructure? Good question. How do you define infrastructure?
Well, beyond roads and bridges that you commonly think of.
Roads and bridges? Okay, Kate's going to answer it. Kate?
We have, in alignment with other organizations, we have chosen infrastructure as the location for affordable housing. We will also have transportation and transit in there, broadband. It'll be drinking and wastewater. I'm sure I'm forgetting something else, but it's not a small list.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, the basis of our direction on that is listening to as many people as possible across the state through the community meetings and meetings like this, because I think as many of the speakers said here this afternoon, all of what we're trying to do is community-led, listening, learning, sharing all that knowledge around the state with one another. It can be really hard if you're in your own community to always know what's happening, even in a community down the road. And so we take it upon ourselves as network builders, if you will, to ensure that all of us get a chance to learn from all of us. And then we can move forward together. So I think with that, we're gonna break, and I believe there's some food left over there. Are there gentlemen over there by the food? Is there some food? They're standing in front of it. So there's some food left, okay. And some water. I really want to encourage you to sit with Marie over there and do a little painting, some watercolor before you go, because it's very calming. And we all need that in our lives. If the folks that have been speaking would be willing to stick around and maybe answer some questions, with the possible exception of Don, who probably needs to go home. But again, thank you all for coming. We wish you a safe drive or trip wherever you're heading for, and do keep in touch with all of us, and we'll try to keep in touch with you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Well, to answer your question, I'm kind of toast. After I played Art Rolnick for about an hour and 45 minutes on the court this morning. There's not much left of budget, so. It's tennis court.